Okay, hi, everyone. I think it's a little bit after 7. I'll apologize up front that you're looking at a logo for East Norwalk Neighborhood Association. This is Diane Cece. I'll have a couple of announcements coming up, and we know folks are anxious to hear the latest news on the zoning moratorium. And we are going to share some news tonight about Norden and another returning application. We'll have a preview tonight from the committee who ran the project for the zoning review in 06855. And if time permits, we can take some Q&A on anything that we discussed tonight. In terms of some quick announcements, I haven't done a full review of the city agenda for the next couple of weeks or city website. You can always go there and take a look at the different committees. Anything important we'll post in our emails as well. But for 06855, those of you who are within the 3rd taxing district, in PTD Electric, the annual ratepayers meeting that's normally held in March, you may recall, was postponed due to COVID restrictions. That's now been rescheduled to this Wednesday, the 19th. They will be holding it out of district, but it'll be close over at the Norwalk Inn and Conference Center at 7 o'clock. You can visit ttd.gov. I understand from staff that the proposed district budget and the general manager's report and agenda and everything will be posted there by tomorrow. Just as a heads up, sometime in June, and I suspect by the second week, the Norden, what's being called the pre-application by P&Z Director Steve Kleppen, is probably going to come before the Zoning Commission as another term is a courtesy review. That's not an actual application from a legal point of view. It's a pre-application, and it's meant to provide the Zoning Commission with an opportunity to see the concept of an application and to provide feedback to an applicant prior to the applicant doing a full-blown, everything that would be involved in a full-blown application that comes in as a legal document. And again, we encourage you to supplement our work with following the agendas and meeting notices at norwalkct.org. And you can also use the opt-in functionality at the city website so that you'll get automated emails for meetings you might be interested in. And actually, let me just, before we get into the presentation, because I just do want to get this out there because I know people are anxious to hear about it. And it's actually a little bit ironic because you're going to hear from the committee tonight. You may see several mentions of the term in there to be proactive and collaborative. And it's something certainly that ENNA embraces, and we've been, doing our best to try to foster that with City Hall and staff, etc. And so I'll just say that I find it a little disheartening at this point to be suddenly finding that the Norden application is indeed coming back. We wouldn't have known even about this pre-application had we not reached out just to get some information on who might be contacting the city of interest. And then there's a lot of questions on the moratorium. And I'll just say, I think our graphic, we had a headline in there that may have been a little bit confusing, so I'll just explain this quickly. The zoning moratorium that went in May of last year, that Steve Kleppen, P&Z Director, was looking to extend. ENNA had asked for that moratorium to not just be in the industrial 1 zone, but also to take in the restricted industrial zone, which is Norden. Had it been in the first moratorium, then the first Norden application couldn't have been accepted at all. Had they included it in this moratorium extension last month, the application could not come before the Zoning Commission as well. So of course, we're disappointed that our request to expand the moratorium both to the restricted industrial and to special permits within 06855 was not considered by the commission, and so far has not been written up to present back to the commission at this point. Okay, so with that, I am going to turn this over to East Norwalk resident and committee member for the ENNA zoning review process. I think we're opening up with Scott Goodwin, and Scott is going to take control of the vehicle here, and he'll, I believe, introduce who the team members were and walk us through the first portion of the presentation.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thanks, Scott.
Yeah, thank you, Diane. All right. Just to set the background, we came together as a group. About a half dozen of us volunteered when Diane put the call out earlier this year that she was looking for folks to take a look at the current zoning and identify red flags with that zoning, and then from there create a presentation that we could take to the Planning and Zoning Commission, which we have been working on it now for almost 2 months, digging into it. Nick Jarima is our lead, but could not be here tonight because he has a very important opportunity. But he has been both a strong leader for this, as well as doing a lot of the heavy lifting on some of the analytic work that you see. In addition to that, we also have Connor Halstead, Dennis Zacharopoulos, Judy Harris, Marianne, and Sarah, who were our sponsors for the group. But basically, this was a group effort. So even if you hear some voices a little more tonight, just know that a lot of folks put a lot of work into this for you. So just skipping forward to the next slide. Everybody with me so far?
Good.
All right, so you can still hear me. That's the important thing. All right, so for just to set the ground rules too, as we go through this, you'll see we'll be handing it back and forth to the different presenters. But one of the things that I wanted to flag is that, you know, if you have comments, questions, things like that, definitely ping us afterwards, bring them up offline. But the goal right now is to bang through this to make sure that we have time for other activities. When we get to the end, clearly if Diane or the other board members want to open it up for questions, that's great. But otherwise, hold your powder, as they say. So, so moving forward then into the context and objectives. Clearly, we all love the area. One of the things that that we've been encountering, as you hear from Diane, both tonight and every month, and sometimes in emails in between, is things seem to be moving pretty quickly. And a lot of times what we have found is that we either find out about things after the fact, and after developers have spent big dollars to get the town on their side, or to get the commission on their side. Sometimes we don't even find out about the contents of applications, or we don't necessarily have time to respond to them because the train has already left the station. In other cases, one of the things that you've noticed is that if you're an applicant, you have deep pockets, and so the city is walking applicants through the process the entire time. But meanwhile, we as residents who bear the impact of this don't necessarily get a similar courtesy. And then, you know, as things we saw, like with the TOD planning, for instance, that they solicited public input, but it's not always taken into consideration. So, you know, that left us feeling like a lot of times these are check the box exercises. And then, you know, in other cases, if you think about the best use in the area, you know, we have this amazing waterfront area down here. You know, we have, you know, access to 95, we have parks, and in a lot of cases, what ends up happening is more multifamily housing being stacked on top, or things grandfathered in that you'll see just aren't really part of the area anymore. So in all that said, our goal is to try to be proactive about this and to identify these elements so that as the town is going through a number of different planning and zoning updates, including updating their industrial zoning and so on, that we can make sure that our voice for this collective group is incorporated into that process. So there's 2 projects tonight. We're going to go through the first one, which is the process improvement and proposals to zoning regulations. But then Diane has also put the call out for other volunteers to help work on the future phase, which is better engagement and interaction with the community and the city. And with that, Sarah, I can hand it over to you, and I can keep driving on the slides if you'd like.
That'd be great. Thanks. So what we did here is we've got an analysis that ultimately comes out with the points that we want to make about objectionable uses and about the language that we see problems with, certain things that we're going to point out here. So the goal, as I think Diane and also Scott mentioned, is that we want to have a proactive and collaborative effort. And we feel it's really important to get the zoning right first, which is why we undertook all of this scrutiny here and how we came up with this analysis. If we can get the groundwork right to start with and get it agreeable by P&Z and the residents, then we have a better way forward on every application that comes across. So we're going to go through our recommendations as well when we get into it a little bit deeper, but 2 most important things or 2 important moratoriums to start on new applications. One is for the uses in East Norwalk industrial zones, and then all special permit applications. You'll see as we go through it, there's some examples of that. The risky legacy industrial uses, number 2, that's because what we found is that in analyzing the current zones and what could be allowed with the current language and the current industrial uses, there are some risks for things that most residents probably would be very concerned about. So that scrutiny allowed us to identify things that we really would make recommendations to remove altogether in our zoning uses, and then limiting uses that overburden local resources or harm coastal environment. What we mean by that is that there are some uses that would be too taxing on things like the infrastructure or school systems, or could harm the environment. So we've identified those and would recommend higher or more stringent limitations on those kinds of things. And again, you'll hear it throughout. It's really important that the residents have involvement. Specifically, we want involvement in the zoning regulations rewrite and then the proposed TOD zoning code. I think everybody knows there was recent TOD work done around the East Norwalk train station. And so that also is a concern for us for language and what is allowable or not uses. But it's really important that we're going to be involved in that rewrite, or we feel that would be important, and that's what we're going to propose to the city. Need to identify all the red flags and correct the special permit criteria. We'll go through that in detail a little deeper in, but the current 13 pieces of criteria aren't quite right. Seems to unfairly favor the applicants. So we're going to go through that. And really the geographic diversity piece, number 6, is making sure that we're getting a balance of the underrepresented neighborhoods who are able to get a voice as well, a seat at the table. So that's kind of high level what we're about to do. And then if you go to methodology, thanks so much. So I mentioned saying that we scrutinized, and this is how we did it. The methodology, we went through, and Nick is not on the call, but he is he did an incredible amount of work here to put this together. Charted allowable uses by right, meaning what's currently allowed, and special permit, meaning that our current special permit process, what that allows, and the pieces of criteria that we have. So we went through everything that is there now for 06855 and mapped out each of the zone boundaries and created a map, and discussed each of the allowable uses, because that helps you to understand what is side by side, different areas, what kinds of uses butt up against other pieces of zoning, and then evaluated allowable uses in a framework that is assessing all of that risk. And I just want to say, we also are looking at it for opportunities. It's not 100%, negative in terms of where our risks. That's where we're starting. And then when we get into further pieces of work, after this particular presentation, trying to get into seeing more positive opportunities. But right now, this is all about I would say about identifying risks and indicating what should change. So after that, what is up next there? Scott, there we go.
The ones we
So
want to
don't know if you're taking that or if Connor is, but I will stop.
I had offered to take it last night when we found out that Nick couldn't be here, but I won't belabor the point. So I don't know if you all can see, this is part of the interactive map that Sarah was referencing that Nick put together for us to work with. But you can see there's groups, industrial zone 1, there's neighborhood business zone, there's restricted industrial, which is primarily Norden. And then there's some R&D that also falls into Norden. And one of the things as we were looking through the zoning, one of the members referred to it as vestigial. And I had to look that up because I feel I heard the word, but it basically means leftover from another time. So if you think about, 100 years ago, it might have made sense to have certain things like that because we were a shipping port. So things like, asphalt, rock, concrete plants, junkyards, oil, propane, natural gas storage, over 30,000 gallons are allowed by special permit in this area. And that's clearly of huge concern. And then same thing like gas stations and car dealerships. We all need gasoline, but I feel like we're pretty well represented on gasoline stations in this area. And then one of the things we identified was car dealerships and what that could do to congestion anywhere in this area. So essentially for the special permit, and in the case of warehouse storage distribution in Industrial 1 right here, what we're proposing is completely eliminating those uses from 06855. So that's a start. But then as we move into the next grouping, we then looked at other areas where special permits or other as of right uses were allowed, and identified, like Sarah had mentioned, in some cases there might be opportunities. In other cases, there's some risk associated with smaller developers. But the reality is, we then started playing out what are the potential quote unquote nightmare scenarios. And said, for these, we're not saying we eliminate them entirely. We're talking about adding language that better protects the sort of spirit and nature of the community, while still allowing for industry and jobs in the area. So, for example, the idea of full service restaurants greater than 2,500 square feet. And what we found was, yeah, boutique or specialty restaurants in the area, like they add something to the community. But the idea of slapping another Outback Steakhouse in the middle of, over by Fitch Avenue, for instance, doesn't make any sense at all. So, for those, we found concerns related to, everything from noise, pollution, you name it. So we're talking about adding language to limit the size or create constraints for these large chains with large footprints. And then also, instead of making it as of right in Industrial 1 and light industrial, switch it over to special permit so that the public can have a say. So I won't go through all of these, but that's one example. And the first one there, you can see, we all know what we've been through, or if you've been in this group for 6 months or more, you know what we've been through as it relates to Norden. So we're proposing language, for instance, restricting semi-tractor trailers to under a certain size, and that reads 14 inches, but you can have a vehicle greater than 14 inches. I'm thinking we probably meant feet, but same thing then, considering, you know, one of the concerns with Norden was schools and the proximity, the fact that so many of their routes are, you know, adjacent to schools up and down Strawberry Hill Avenue there. So, you know, setting reviewable enforceable limits on the number of trips and so on. So the idea is, how do we make sure that if something does happen, that the community is protected as well? The big takeaway, though, is how do we get a seat at the table as a stakeholder group during the rewrite process, which is in progress right now. And with that, I'm actually going to hand it over to Connor for special permits.
Thank you, Scott.
Sure.
So a special permit may be granted if its proposed use or structure is in harmony with the general purpose and intent of these regulations, and after consideration of the following conditions where applicable. Kind of opaque, honestly. Definitely not intuitive to someone who is not a lawyer such as myself. But what we have here are listed out some of the conditions and then the observation that we have. Thank you, Scott. The observation that we have associated with that. So for instance, for E, adverse impact from noise, odor, fumes, dust, and artificial lighting. So that's what tractor trailers, 200 tractor trailers would bring, essentially, right? This can contradict city noise ordinance criteria, which is not additive. Noise and other factors should be considered at various scales. Example, one person yelling is under a noise ordinance versus a stadium of people. And the metaphor there is that there are no truck accidents right now in that neighborhood. But if there was a distribution center, we can logically assume that there would be truck accidents. But part of the argument that can be used there is that since there aren't any truck accidents right now, there never will be. And since we're right next to 95 in this neighborhood, we can't complain because we already have tons of tractor trailers coming to and fro all day long. At the same time, I don't know if that logic holds up in our neighboring communities in Darien, Westport, et cetera. So I think what the important thing here is to note is that this does matter. There are kids that are playing in these neighborhoods. There are families growing up here. And this diesel particulate, these fumes, these lights will destroy that neighborhood, and it'll impact all of the surrounding neighborhoods as well. So not to get too into the weeds, but that's essentially what we do. We go through some of the conditions that we picked out here, and these are our observations for what those conditions entail, essentially. So I think we can go to the next slide, Scott, unless you wanted to add any other commentary there. So specifically regarding traffic, right? I'm not going to read the conditions once again, but here we have two conditions regarding stable traffic flow and noise, odor, fumes, et cetera. So let's go through and see what our observations and positions are based on what we came together as a group and decided. The acceptability of the level of service is solely at the discretion of the commission. Currently, there are no representatives on the commission from 06855. This is pretty glaring for us because the commission has the sole discretion to determine whether or not these conditions are met, and none of them live in this neighborhood. And maybe that's not something that should be a requirement, but it's certainly not a best practice that this is being decided right now solely at the discretion of a commission that has no presence within this neighborhood. And personally, on an anecdotal level, you know, I'm walking or running or riding a bike down Strawberry Hill on a frequent basis to get to the beach. And I can see that I'm not the only one doing it. There are multiple playgrounds. You know, there are schools in the area. There are kids that are going up and down those roads all day long. There's a bike lane. There's a bike lane, and, you know, thinking about 200 tractor trailers whipping by that bike lane, that's concerning for anybody who lives in this neighborhood, amongst the other things, the particulate, the noise, et cetera. So that leads me to the second point. There's really no mechanism right now to take community feedback as a consideration. So I know that, for instance, this committee was formed because we felt like we didn't have a voice in this process. And that is something that we would like to see addressed, that there is a mechanism that allows us to give the feedback before it's too late, before we find ourselves, getting ourselves out of bed on a Saturday morning to go picket in the freezing cold outside of a senior center, because we feel like we don't have any recourse. I think that this is a case where we want an ounce of prevention rather than a pound of cure, or 10 pounds of cure, whatever it was that we had to employ in this situation. I won't go down through each one of these bullets, but I will say that we really feel like we're not getting as fair a shake as we want with regard to the traffic studies that are being leveraged, and the general idea of stability and what that entails. Because right now, if they're making an argument that the traffic is stable, it's, first of all, if you go down to Fish Street and you look at the underpass at East Norwalk train station, I don't think anybody's satisfied with the congestion there currently. But to use that as a baseline and to feel like the studies aren't being as comprehensive or objective as we'd like to see, or that our feedback isn't being heard, it definitely seems incongruous. So these are our observations and positions for how we think we can address that. And Scott, anything else on that from you?
No.
Great. Next slide, please.
Yeah.
So once again, we go through some of the conditions that we have that are in the application for special permits, and essentially what our proposed changes are. So I'll go through a couple of those right now. For stable traffic flow, and basically how it's interpreted to affect pedestrians and vehicular safety. Modern traffic study techniques should be used. We feel that the traffic studies that are being used right now aren't indicative of what's actually going on, and we'd like to see more robust studies and more modern studies employed to determine what the current stability is. Another example, availability of mass transit facilities and provision of sidewalks with a minimum clearance of 5 feet without obstructions. So we believe that 5 to 7 foot unobstructed sidewalks must be required and enforced everywhere. Adverse impact from noise, odor, fumes, dust, and artificial lighting. Adverse environmental impact from including but not limited to noise, odor, fumes, dust, pollution, traffic, artificial lighting, and diminished natural light, pardon me. Impact on neighborhood properties as compared to uses and structures permitted as a matter of right. We want to make sure that we're seeing the impact on property values and economic impact on the community. So especially with regard to the 06855 community, our property values and the value of the quality of life that we have in our community would not be positively impacted from a distribution center. And we feel that that's something that should be a stringent criteria that's enforced here, because that's why we invested in this community. That's what we love about living here. And it's a huge part of essentially what we get out of living in East Norwalk. So essentially we want to make sure that that's being taken into consideration. And as of right now, we do not feel that that is being taken into consideration. I won't go through the remaining points, but essentially what we've done, as I mentioned, is we've taken the conditions in the special permit and we've proposed changes or made distinct observations. Next slide, please, Scott. So final point, I know that I had alluded to this earlier, but nobody on the committee currently lives in 06855, and that's not to cast any fault. It's just to identify what we see as an issue, because as I mentioned before, the decisions that are being made are at the sole discretion of the committee. And the committee is comprised of Norwalk residents, but this is a specific proposal that acutely impacts one community more than others. And I think that it's only fair, we think that it's only fair, that we have a voice in that committee of people who are actually present in the community, who live there, or at least really understand what the community is all about, what the neighborhood is all about. And if you look at this map that Nick put together, you'll see the tags around Norwalk, and you'll see where everybody lives. And you'll see one tag that's really close to East Norwalk, but that's actually South Norwalk. That's on the other side of the Straffolino Bridge. East Norwalk, where this is proposed, and is one of the best up and coming neighborhoods in Norwalk, where tons of development is going on, where people are seeing their property values skyrocket currently, where Calf Pasture Beach is becoming more and more of a draw to Norwalk residents and residents outside of Norwalk. We don't have anybody on the committee right now. And I think that when you look at a situation like Norden, where there's such a polarizing effect, a night and day effect that 200 tractor trailers or more would have on a community, not just at that location in that specific neighborhood, but also going down Strawberry Hill, taking a right on Fifth Street, and then going onto 95, that would dramatically transform our community in a way that would not benefit the local residents in our estimation. So we feel like we want to be heard here. And this is a really great example of what we think would be a best practice, which is that even if we can't get representation, which we really strongly prefer, we want to feel like there's somebody on that committee who understands the neighborhood and has skin in the game. Whether or not that's an actual resident, maybe that's not the most important criteria, but right now, based on how this all transpired recently, we do not feel that we have a voice on the committee currently. So I think that this is where I pass it over to Mary Ann, unless I'm mistaken.
Yeah. Mary Ann, you're up.
So what we're doing right now is, we're just concerned that we haven't been included, as everybody's already all said, especially with the new Norden application that's coming up. We really had hoped that the moratorium would have been included, and all of the new applications that are coming in. We've got something going on at 25 Van Zandt, and I think Diane is probably the one that knows the most about it. And then we also had the development going on at 12 Van Zandt, which is the sorry, I'm messing this one up. 25 Van Zandt is the industrial one that they want to have a learning center there. And then 12 Van Zandt, a 5-unit townhouse. We also know that, and I'm not sure what's going on with this, but the Bank of America parcel that had gotten approved for, I think it was as of right 11 units. Apparently there's a sign up there now that building is for sale. So that could potentially be yet another issue. I think next slide.
Yeah.
Priority number one is really to have a moratorium now so that we can at least get some say in with the new zoning application and all of the special permits, so we have some control over that and get involved. Eliminating the legacy industrial uses that we've got that really don't make sense for East Norwalk the way it is now. And as I think Sarah mentioned early on, the whole overburdening of our resources. We don't want our water treatment plants to get overburdened with more residential housing, which is already happening. And just basically, that we get, some say at what's going on in East Norwalk. It seems like we're always being reactionary to something we find out when it's already pretty far down the line. And, hopefully they want to be collaborative with us and work with us, because we really care about East Norwalk and what they do as far as a development here. Next slide.
You can see here in the appendices what we referenced earlier, that we actually went through and plotted it out and mapped it out, and then compared that against the language. This is the map that Nick had put together, and then we went through and identified low, medium, or high risk for each of us, and this could be good if, this could be bad if, what we could change. And that's how we came up with the proposals that we showed earlier. So
I'm just doing a time check here, and I don't know if folks have their hands raised. We actually meant this to be a preliminary review. So there's not a lot of detail we can go into on each of the points. We just wanted to give people a flavor of what this project was going to, how this was going to result as a document. I do want to say first, before we take any hands that may be up, that this is an extraordinary amount of work and effort and result by this committee. I think it's the first time in terms of ENNA with participation, like the things with master plans and position statements, that instead of just high level kind of concept bullet points regarding zoning and development issues, that this actually lines up the observations and recommendations and concerns specifically to the city code, the zoning codes, and most importantly, everything lines up with really relevant feedback on the special permit criteria, the 11 criteria. And we kind of dance around that all the time, depending on what application is in front of us. So as far as I know, this is the first time that this effort has been made to actually nail down these points to each one of the criteria and to the process overall. So I want to personally thank the committee for the work you've put into this, and obviously the passion of how much you care about getting this right, and also understanding what getting this right means for our future. Because if we don't get this right on the front end, it's just it's kind of a losing battle, every time dealing with application after application, which you guys already know. So let's see here. Is Megan still on, my co-pilot?
Moderator?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay. So if you guys are okay, we can, it's only 7:45. We can take some questions on any of the announcements that I made. And we could take some broad, kind of high level questions on what you saw here in the presentation. I think, I'm sorry, I may have missed it here, with the next steps and the actual meeting with Steve Kleppen. Did we go over that at the beginning, or?
We did not. We do not have a slide in here about that. Mary Ann, you want to take that one?
The plan was originally that we were going to be meeting with Steve Kleppen and review this. But I think, Diane, you had mentioned that potentially this may get escalated to, and I can't remember the woman's name that is economic development.
Yeah, that would be Jessica Casey.
Yeah,
I think she has a married name now.
Yeah.
And also to and actually economic development, tourism, a whole host of departments report directly into Jessica, one of which is planning and zoning. So Steve Kleppen is a direct report into Jessica. And then the other one that we thought we might suggest would be the chief of staff for the city, Alicia King, who is actually, collaborates things like this, for the as a mayor's liaison and through all the department heads. And I think that would be something, I don't know that we've nailed down the timeline on that yet, but I would certainly say, we don't want this thing sitting around, even though this is a preliminary review and it's, apt to be tweaked now, especially with any feedback tonight. We're coming up on the holiday, but I would say that the target is definitely June for this. And then just as a reminder, folks may remember when we started this endeavor that we decided to break this project into 2 phases. The identification of the actual zone regulations and special permit data that you see here tonight was phase 1. And then the other major component of dealing with zoning and all interactions with City Hall has to do with community outreach and stakeholder input. And that's going to be the phase 2 of this, hopefully starting up in June. if you read the ENNA newsletter email last night, we do have a couple of volunteers who have stepped up for that project. And we really would like to have a few more. So we can spread the work around and also get a lot of different perspectives from people within the community as to how the city can improve community outreach. And that's on developer applications. The example we give is, nobody should be waking up one morning and finding out, a high-rise factory building is being erected next to them. It just shouldn't happen. Okay, so we can, if we have any hands raised, we can take a few questions. Megan?
Sure, yeah, there's one hand raised from Patrick Shannon, so I'll ask you to unmute Patrick.
Got it. Yeah. So there's more than a few things here for us to think about, but the fact that there's no representatives from our area, that probably has to be fixed, laying it out there. And how can individuals kind of register their interest and be more involved?
Great questions. Thank you, Patrick. So just a brief overview of when we say the commission and who sits on there. So there are Norwalk residents. Everyone is a volunteer. Commission members for Planning Commission and Zoning Commission are mayoral appointees, and they're approved by the Common Council. And they serve specific terms either as a full commissioner or an alternate commissioner, and their roles on voting and reviewing applications and city applications differ depending on if they're full or alternate. The city has some bare bones kind of definitions and overview of what commission members do, how often they meet, what statutory requirements at the state level that they operate under, etc. And those can be found on the city website, but we're also looking, I'm glad you brought it up, Patrick, because ENNA is looking to see if we can get some volunteers to help do a one-page kind of job description for all of the appointed positions within the city, appointed meaning not staff and not elected. The key here is that we need to have a pool of people from East Norwalk who are willing to put their resumes or their interest in to become candidates. And so, it's one thing for us to say that we need to really get representation from here. But on the flip side of that, we do need to be sure that we're trying to encourage people to apply. The best way to do it is what most people do is they literally take their resume, like their work resume, and they submit it into the mayor's office. Yeah.
Harry and I went to the same school.
Okay.
And we
so is that
need
good
to,
or bad?
I'm not sure. So it doesn't make any difference. We need to, and it doesn't make any difference. We need to get to him and let him know he has listened to lots of positions from East Norwalk.
Mm-hmm.
Not about the issues that we're bringing up, but there are other issues.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd be very happy to write a note and say, there's something you need to listen to, and we need to have representation. So maybe I've said too much, but there really if you don't have representation, what do you have? You have nothing.
Right, and I will say that in theory, commission appointments, just like elected officials in districts, really are there to represent the entire city in their decision-making process. So I will say that when you're looking at someone who may be from, West Norwalk, it's not that they're there representing West Norwalk. We all get that, but to the point of the presenters tonight, it's just inherent in the fact that if you don't live in a particular neighborhood, especially one as unique as East Norwalk, that you may not really be representing the best interests when you're reviewing these applications. But I would encourage people, because we've had the conversation with Harry Rilling before, is that we need to encourage people to put their names in the hat to be considered. I'm not going to speak to the political mechanisms that guide those things because we're not involved in that. I'm not involved in it personally either. I know that that's some component of it, but I do know that overall throughout the city, they often put out a call for people to submit their resumes because they do want to get more people on, especially when you see some of these boards where you have members who have served for years and years and years, and we really need to make some changes there.
Oh, that's good. And when you submit your resume, you submit your resume for a particular position.
No.
And you talk about the things that you want to try and accomplish.
Right.
And I think it would be great for this group to distribute some thoughts about what should be there so that who's ever interested in submitting a resume would be able to fulfill those things and, just not be off the mark.
Yeah, I agree. We could actually even do, it's kind of a wish list to that. So someone who feels that they fit either that criteria or that that's where their interests really lie, would step up to that. And then their cover letter is typically what happens is there's a cover letter that really expresses what their desire is. Oftentimes in there, the city will get resumes that just say, I'm really just interested in serving in whatever capacity you think is best. And here's my background, here's what I'm interested in, but it's not for a particular commissioner, committee, or agency or authority. So
No.
thank you, Patrick.
Yeah, right. Okay. And the other thing too is the resume should also say that a Norden trucking destination equals death to East Norwalk. I mean, sorry to say it, but there's just not enough room for that to work.
Appreciate that. Probably nobody on here disagrees with that. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Anybody else, Megan?
Oh, we've got one from Mary Beth.
I found that the PowerPoint slides were particularly helpful, and I'm wondering if they're posted somewhere so we can download a copy for reference.
Well, committee members, as I know this is a preliminary slide for presenting the sneak preview. I'm sorry, Scott, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, we can put this on the cloud, as they say, so that you can download and share with your friends.
Thank you. It would be really helpful to be able to pass
Yep.
it on. Useful information.
Yep. And I hope I didn't overstep. I think that we spoke about this on the weekend, but in the ENNA email newsletter that went out last night, I believe I had the link to this there. If you click on the icon at the cover page of this report, I believe I did a link there to a PDF of it. And just with the disclaimer that this is the preliminary kind of sneak peek of it, and likely to hear some feedback and maybe be modified. But I'm pretty sure it's in that email as a link. And then if with the committee members is okay with that, then we can also, I think Charles D. Bisegli is on here, and he can also post that to our website as well. So it'll be in as a document in our website that you can click on.
Thank you.
Our next meeting, our monthly meeting, is June 21st. Watch for our email newsletters pretty much every week. We'll continue to keep people posted on Norden. I'm in communication with Steve Kleppen. Actually, we're emailing back and forth right before we went live. And I also anticipate having that phone meeting with Harry Rilling tomorrow to begin to discuss that. So we'll give people updates on that. And also, I think it's important that we not drop the request for the moratorium. So we're going to make sure that the city is aware that we still have that request on the table, the expansion and the other zone. Go ahead, Mayor.
Yeah, quick question. Should we, if people have any feedback to the zoning presentation that we just gave, how would they give us feedback?
Thank you. So the best way is via email. and can be distributed to the committee. Usually we ask stuff to come in through info@eastnorwalk.org, which is our main email.
Okay.
If you guys prefer to have stuff come directly to you, just let me know offline who you want it funneled through, and we'll post that on the website and through an email. But typically communication, it's better for us if it's centralized first, and it's info@eastnorwalk.org. And again, our website is eastnorwalk.org. Thank everybody for attending. And if you do have any concerns or questions, comments regarding anything from tonight or anything related to East Norwalk, feel free to email us. And we look forward to seeing everyone next month, and we'll be in touch.